phone is on.
Everyone turn your phones off.
Sorry. God, shut up. It's actually Elton John. Oh my God, he's still sorry. Shut up, man.
Should we just all listen to our
Okay, there you go.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Old Vic Voices Off discussion. Particular welcome, given that I believe we have competition in the shape of some football match.
Dead rubber, nil. Absolutely.
My name is Sarah Hemming, and I write about theatre for the Financial Times. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage playwright Simon Stevens. Who read Seawall, and actor Andrew Scott. Seen giving an absolutely sublime performance in it. Just a couple of notes about the space we're in before we get started. The Old Vic is 200 years old this year, so happy birthday to this venerable old theatre, beautiful space. Seawall is part of the 200th anniversary celebrations, and it might be old, but it's still very much alive and kicking. Since he was appointed as artistic director in 2015, Matthew Warchus has produced a hugely varied programme of work. New writing, musicals, dance, family shows, experimental drama, as well as wonderful revivals of classic plays. Over 300,000 people saw performances here last year, so not bad, Old Vic, for something that's 200 years old. It's also a registered charity, and it receives no regular subsidy. So your support is hugely appreciated, and a big thank you for being here tonight. A little information on how the evening will work. We will chat for about 20-25 minutes, and then it's open to you to ask your questions. I'm sure you have loads of wonderful questions, and we'll look to wrap up. We're running a little bit late. It should be 8:45, maybe a little bit later. And just one other tiny thing. If you haven't seen the show, it's quite hard to talk about without talking about what it's about. So just...
who hasn't seen the show?
Anybody not seen it?
It'd be good if there was one person.
It's not the only person. The only two of you.
It's a comedy. It's very... But it is, that's one of the things about it.
Have you seen Starlight Express?
The first time I saw Seawall, I realised at the end that I was holding my breath. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I'm sure you felt that too. It's a really beautiful piece of theatre, devastating piece of theatre. Monologue, very short, like people who haven't seen it. One of the nice things about the Simon, yeah, lovely, very short, very light, but full of depth, full of darkness, and it manages to touch on huge subjects in its short running time. Love, death, grief, God, all the biggies basically in 30 minutes, just amazing. It also asks the actor to summon up a whole world, really, and several characters, just through his portrayal. Astonishing piece of work. Simon, can you tell us a little can you tell us a little bit about writing the play? I mean, I think there's this saying, isn't there, that necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
I think in this case it really was, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. The Bush Theatre commissioned the play. The Bush Theatre, for those of you who don't know, is a beautiful theatre with a great tradition of new writing in Shepherd's Bush. And it was in the first 6 months of the tenure of Josie Rourke as artistic director. The first female artistic director in London theatre for a generation, really. And the Arts Council rewarded her appointment by slashing her budget by 25% within months of her appointment. And she fought single-handedly to get the budget back. And then the weather of London summer in 2008 just shat on her and flooded the theatre. The theatre was flooded. So she defeated the Arts Council, and then she had to defeat the gods. rather than going dark, which she felt I think would have been a real gesture of defeat, she asked a whole series of writers to write pieces that could be performed in natural light. And I was on holiday with my wife and my father-in-law and my kids in France. And I got an email from her. Saying, can you write a monologue or a piece for one or two actors to be performed in natural light, and can you do it in 3 weeks? But I really like Josie and I really like the bush, so I said yes, I'll definitely do that. And had no idea what to write about. And then one day I was having a swim in the sea. It was the west coast of France, and I kind of swam out, and I swim like Alex swims. And was looking back at the cove that he describes and saw my father-in-law reading a book and my kids playing on the rock behind him. And then I thought, Jesus, Martin, you're not watching those kids. Anything could happen. And I kind of swam back to the shore really quickly. And then I thought, actually, this is quite a good idea. And in those days, you didn't get email on data roaming. You had to wait till you got back from holiday, get all your emails. I got back, and me and Andrew, we'd shared theatres for about kind of 5 years without working together. Yeah. And we were both working at the National Theatre. Yeah. And you'd been to see Harper Regan, and you wrote me a lovely email. And I got back and got your email and thought, oh fuck it, I'll write that monologue for Andrew because he's my favourite actor. You know, I've always written for actors, and the first time I saw him was on this stage in Conor McPherson's Dublin Carol. He's an actor who captures my imagination, and when I put those two things together, I wrote it in about 5 days.
So Andrew, you couldn't say no then, could you? What did you think when you saw it?
Oh no, I knew immediately that it was brilliant piece of writing. I was actually, in part of the season, there was a couple of other plays. Some of the plays, very inventively, Josie had asked to be set in the dark, and there was a couple of other plays that they asked various actors to be in different plays. But I realised that I couldn't do the other plays, I'd just have to do this one because it seemed to me a kind of genius play, and no less of a genius play because it was short. I think sometimes people think because a play is 30, 35 minutes or whatever it is, it's in some way less than a play that's 2.5 hours. And I mean, there's no rule to suggest why that might be true, and I think it contains all the things that I want to see in a play, which is great humanity and comedy. There's a huge amount of lightness in it, and great themes about why we all here or what happens to us when we go, and so unbelievably naturalistically written. Sometimes I feel like it's important to say that every single thing, every everything is written. There's no part of that that's not something that Simon has written. You know, it's not improvised in any way. So it gives me great pleasure when that Scrubs, but in that Scrubs moment when people feel that they're relaxed enough to say, Scrubs! Because it means they feel like they're not in a theatre where they're like,
give us 10 years, there'll be 1,000 people.
Yes, Scrubs! Scrubs the musical. Scrubs! Exclamation mark. Exactly. So it is a bit like Starlight Express. Yeah, so anyway, that's a rambling answer to yes, how totally amazed I was by the play when I first read it.
I mean, it's incredibly, obviously, it is beautifully light and, as you say, very naturalistic, but it's also incredibly dark. I mean, you face up Simon to one of, the worst thing anyone can imagine happening, I think. I mean, for anyone who's a parent, anyone even who isn't a parent, it's just the most awful thing.
I'm always doing that,
was that hard to do?
Like the amount of fucking children I've killed. I'm really, really surprised that social services haven't.
They're here tonight.
I always think I write two types of plays. I write scary plays in which kids are killed on stage, like punk rock or whatever, or Motortown, and then sad plays in which kids are killed off stage. And this is like that, but with Starlight Express mixed in.
With roller skates. Yeah.
What was your question, sorry?
My question was, I mean, well, the moment when it happens, the moment when he's
the roller skate moment.
The roller skate when it happens. Yeah. That description is so brilliant. It's so, I mean, I'm sure we've all had those moments where something happens and things seem to slow down, and the way you describe it, Andrew, the way you've written it, it is like watching something like that happen, so that, because your brain can't understand it, it can't comprehend it, so it's just describing it. It's going, hang on, that's not right. That's so wonderful and so painful. How did you do it? Was it easy to write? I mean, did you sit there thinking, what happened?
It's a funny thing, you know, the relationship between a writer and the darkness of the writer's materials. Weirdly, I don't find Seawall dark, actually. I find it really uplifting. I mean, it's sad, and it goes to terrible places, and Andrew takes us really exquisitely to places of real frankness and honesty and kind of on the edges of despair. But for me, it's a play which is as defined by defiance of that darkness as it is by the darkness. And I think any human who... I think the only mature response to a world is a response of optimism. I'm absolutely an optimist, like to my core. I'm angrily optimistic. I think pessimism is a very immature response to the world. But I think a real optimist needs to consider life with all its savagery and brutality and difficulty and sadness and grief and despair, because to not do that is just to be an idiot. But, and I think any parent does, any actor does, any human does. You really think seriously about the kind of gravity of being alive, then you have to go there completely, and that's how I pay my mortgage, so I've kind of got to do it, really. I'm shit at writing telly, so I've got to do something to pay
It is that thing, isn't it, Andrew, that you somehow bring out in the performance that we all know that at any minute the life we live could be completely turned upside down. And it could be something completely random, like somebody doesn't look in their wing mirror as they pull out, and that's it. I mean, for you performing it, how do you cope with that sort of twin track of this terrible thing that's happened, and then this sort of lightness of, it's like the swimming above the wall sort of thing,
I feel like the play never ceases to affect me. What I think is really important, I love the expression that you tell sad stories to entertain. I think that's very true. I think people try and they're trying to communicate something other than I'm just really terribly upset. So for me, the most important thing and why it feels like a great loss is that you have to build the life. You have to build the joy and the fun and the lightness and the great thing that we all love about life in order to see what the loss is, and that's how we feel the loss. So if I'm going out giving a clue as to, even in some small way, as a clue, like in, always in bad soap opera acting when they're hugging the person and over, they go, I'm fine, and they're like, but I'm not really, so the audience know, like spoon feeding the audience. I don't think that's what happens in...
Andrew's got masterclass in bad soap opera acting. You didn't bank on that when you got your ticket.
Oh, listen, they're out there. But I do think it's really interesting, I was reading an article the other day, there's a lot of stuff, in the news at the moment about trigger warnings and all that stuff. And I was reading an article the other day and it said this may contain themes that may be triggering about trauma and stuff. And I thought, I don't know, I think there's a place for that stuff, but I think that's not the way life happens. And I think what the reason that this is so affecting is because we have to, in order to really fulfill our time here in the world, we have to try and have the appreciation that this time here is finite, and that at any moment we're not going to get a warning to go, at this, apart from the reminder like this play does, which is it could all go like that, and we don't get any warning for it. And I think that's what's so moving about the play, and why it's much more important to me to play the lightness, because the darkness will always play itself for me.
And there's an amazing moment as well, isn't there, where the wife comes home with the shopping, And I don't know about you, but I'd forgotten she existed at that point. Because you just come in with the child, and suddenly she comes back with this shopping, all this stuff she's gone to get, and it's just heartbreaking. I mean, that's sort of...
Well, I mean,
she's going to see this scene.
There's a real oddity in there, because there's nothing as banal as death, in a way.
Yeah.
Like, there's two things which are absolutely guaranteed to happen to all human beings. They're born and they die. It should be like the most banal thing. But then when we live through grief, or we live through death, or we experience the death of others, it's always the continuation of like the rest of the world seems in some way perverse.
Yeah.
You know, when I've grieved, when people I've loved have died, I remember kind of like walking past. I remember somebody very, very important to me died, and then walking past somebody cleaning the windows of a local shop, and thinking, how fucking dare you clean windows today? But that's not what happens. The beauty of life is its ephemerality, and that can only be dramatised by really considering the banality of death, I think.
And all those little details that
make
up life.
The yogurt,
and the, yes.
That yogurt in France is really good as well. Yes. The yogurt and the athlete's foot cream. That always gets a laugh, which makes me worry about my own, kind of foot hygiene, because every fucking year I go to the beach, I always get... sorry, you didn't anticipate that. You didn't anticipate Andrew's got masterclass in bad soap opera acting, or Simon Stevens' confession of his slightly unclean feet. Well, there you go. This is what you get with 200 years of the Old Vic. Oh man, they are difficult to get into.
They are difficult to get into, yeah. Andrew, when the show starts, I mean, usually what people do in a show, well, generally is they do what we just did. They come onto the stage, but you're already here. I don't know how long you've been hanging around.
That is the scariest, and because I have to pretend that I ended up finding this really intimidating, that thousands of people in full light are coming in. But in a way, actually that's not true. Sometimes I feel scared, and I go through waves, I think, oh my god, what the fuck are you doing? Because when we started this, in the Bush Theatre, it was 50 people, right? 50 people, it was like this, the stage was the entire, so it had a great sort of intimacy about it, and that was wonderful. But we've always said that we did it in Edinburgh the year after, and people really liked it, so we did it in the Traverse, and then there was a sort of spillover, and I just did it in the auditorium. I've done it in Dublin, in a small, in a project in Dublin, and in the Shed we did it. And I've done it in the rehearsal room in the National. So whatever happens, you just tell the story to whoever is there, and whatever happens, happens. So last night there was a fly on stage. You can't just be like, the fly is not there, or somebody is coughing, or somebody is, you have to just be here with the people that are here. And if it's a big space, you have to play the big space. You can't be like, so I think the worry for us, I suppose, was, what's it going to be like if you go to this intimate thing that people liked about the play before? What's it going to be like in a big, huge... And actually, if I were to choose, this space is my favourite space to have played it, because it feels really intimate, and I feel you get a sense of the sea, or the depth of the sea, and the smallness of us against the sort of black abyss. So all that stuff about people coming in and seeing them, I find it very moving, the idea of, because actors never, you hear it there's a tannoy backstage in the dressing room, but you never see the audience come, you're very rarely preset. And when I go to see plays, I always think, oh my god, these poor actors have to get up in front of all these people. You forget that fear. So it is scary, but once you start, and I think, when I get really scared, I think, just think I'm really looking forward to telling them this story, and to really tell every single person who's here.
And is it important also that sort of shift from when it's you and when it's Alex? It's sort of like you can't quite tell when that happens, and you sort of bring the audience with you, that you sort of come on this journey as I go into this character.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know, maybe with all characters that I don't feel a difference between me and, I don't think about Alex or whatever part I'm playing. I just feel like it's me.
It's very interesting, that tension between the actor and the performer. I always think this bit is like war. I've read Jacqueline Bolton, a theatre academic, wrote an essay about this bit of Andrew Scott's arm. It's a really interesting essay.
I'm thrilled about this.
What moment is that Alex's arm and Andrew's arm? And what position?
I've never heard this before.
She's really good. She's Jacqueline Bolton, Professor Jacqueline Bolton of the University of Lincoln.
How long was the essay? How long was it?
It's really good. It's really interesting. It's like the moment of the hole in the stomach as well. Every time I see it, and I should know, you know, if anybody knows kind of what happens in the end, it's probably me. Every time you talk about the hole in the stomach, I swear to God, I see a hole in your stomach. It's really alarming.
How do you do that, Andrew? How do you do
Mirrors, it's all mirrors and smoke.
We're doing it at Starlight Express. It's green screen. No, I feel like I see it too. That's what acting is. It's empathy, isn't it? It's just really believing that. It's just using your imagination. I always say, like, you do play a part, and you know, I've said this before, and kids are brilliant. That's why I think it's so wonderful about Lucy playing all the stuff that she plays. And we move further away from that as adults. And the great thing about being an actor is that you just play. You just go, oh, I really believe this, and I don't have to feel embarrassed about it because that's what my job is.
And it's how we understand the world, isn't it? Through stories. It's is how. One of the things I wondered about that is that, Simon, the descriptions of the other people, so the father-in-law, the wife, the child, are in some ways very precise, but in others not. You don't actually really know what they look like. You know the father-in-law's tall.
I'm always surprised by Andrew's take on Arthur. It's really beautiful. Is England are winning 9-0 now? It's somebody's phone was borrowed to tell the time. England are winning 9. Whose phone is it? Oh my God! You wouldn't believe the things that happen. No.
I was thinking, one of you needs to turn your phone. What random person is this?
It's our clock. That's our clock.
That's our clock.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Anyway. England are winning 9-0. That is surprising. No, they're not really. That's cruel. What was the question? The question was
the other characters, and the fact that although in some ways they're very precise, in others they're not, and I wondered whether that was a way of getting the audience to put their own people into them. Do you know what I mean? When you talk about Lucy shuffling around and holding her arms up, I think. But you don't say exactly what she looks like. And so then the audience can then, you know, they work with you. They imagine Lucy. They bring their own Lucy.
And I think the biggest thing is what was the cruelest thing that you ever could say.
Yeah.
And the line is, I'm not telling you.
How many times do you get asked that? How many times do you get asked that question?
Oh yeah, every night.
What is the thing he doesn't say?
I would never know. I have a very, very specific idea.
Yeah, me too. And a few years ago, people asked me that question. And when we started off doing this, I'd answer it. And every time I answered it, people looked at me like I had the most disappointing imagination.
Yeah, that's
it's whatever you're thinking.
Exactly.
That's much more interesting.
And it's also right. Because I actually don't even know what you think.
No, and I don't know what you think.
Yeah, that's good.
We can do like 3, 2, 1. But that's what I think. I was trying to think how dreadful it would be if we'd written a description of what Lucy looked like.
Yeah.
You know, she would completely disappear from the imagination of the audiences.
Yeah.
You know, she exists as completely and as really as the hole in Andrew's stomach, or as the fact that this space in his arm is both Andrew Scott and Alex's arm. You know. And that space for, you know, the function of the dramatist is to create a space for interpretation so that we can use this room, this theatre, as a machine of empathy. That's our job, is to exercise empathy. You know, that's our function in the culture, is to exercise empathy. And one of the ways we do that is to excite the imagination of the people who come to hear the story.
I mean, do you think, I mean, you've both been working on this now for intermittently for 10 years.
But do you know what I was thinking? Do you know what I was thinking? I have only ever performed this 25 times or something, 25 to 30 times.
It's not many, is it?
You know, in a normal run of theatre, you would do it 70 performances.
Yeah, 70.
Yeah, last year we did Hamlet 50 times. What?
You did more successful plays than I did. In normal run, you do 20 odd plays.
But it's a really weird thing because we've been doing it for, like when we did it at the Bush, the first time we did it for 6 performances, and then we did it in Edinburgh for maybe a week or a week and a half. Then we did it in the Shed for a week. Then we did it in Dublin for another week, and this has been sort of the longest run. So actually, weirdly, it's over 10 years. It's a very strange thing to...
The other thing that I think about is this is really weird. The person who's not here, and because he's on holiday and having a deserved holiday and ought to be here, is George Perrin, who directed it, and has directed it and redirected it for 10 years. But my memories of the rehearsals are really, they seem so relaxed. Like kind of just gentle kind of run-throughs, and then with very incremental notes. I don't know, your memories are probably very
Totally not.
Really? Was I just not paying attention?
No. The great thing that I always say that I learned from Seawall is the ability to be able to look directly at the audience. And when we were we rehearsed it above a pub in Shepherd's Bush, and and George said, what's really important is to be able to tell the story directly to and so during the rehearsal he brought in some random friends of his that I didn't know, and he said, just tell them the story. And I found it so difficult, because in acting you're usually you're kind of taught, you're all in the darkness, and we just pretend sort of that you're not there in a way, even though we've got our third eye, and so if you guys are laughing, we stop, and blah, blah, blah. But to be able to tell a story directly was an incredibly difficult thing to do in a sort of genuine way, and not be scared to look at somebody in the eye. And that has been the biggest influence about in my work, I think, about being able, in relation to Hamlet when we had to do the soliloquies. The first thing, totally based on working on Seawall, is the idea of seeing, because I can see people going or laughing the way a particular person, I always use the metaphor of a dinner party, that if you're telling a story at a dinner party and somebody's checking their phone, you kind of don't focus on that person. You focus on the person that's listening to you. So you have to be completely live to what's happening. And if someone is snoring, you just go, well, I'm not going to look at you. And if someone is going, oh my God, I'm really with you, you go, cool. So that's what I found terrifying the first time we rehearsed it.
But then that wasn't directed by George. That was discovered through a space in which you could discover it rather than giving you notes, right?
Yes, that's true. Yeah. That's absolutely true.
The chips joke gets fewer and fewer laughs every year. Like 10 years ago, there'd be at least one confident laugh.
There was a brilliant guy the other night. He was like, that was me. And he had a point. He was,
it's interesting you mentioned Hamlet, because obviously in between times you've played many of the parts, but Hamlet, one of the biggest, obviously. And I was going to ask you whether it had affected Hamlet. You've answered that to some, but probably in other ways too. How have they affected each other? Because you've now come back.
Really have. As I say, I was really excited because I do find it sometimes a bit weird in soliloquies. I remember auditioning for a theatre director, and I was after we'd done Seawall, and it was a soliloquy. Actually, it was actually Edgar. It was, yes, I can get this right. It wasn't. I ended up playing it on the television, but anyway. So I was doing the soliloquy for him, and he said, "Can you just?" And I was looking at him, and he said, "Can you just look above us, just to save our embarrassment?" Fucking extraordinary thing to say, and then because I was like, "But it's a soliloquy. I'm supposed to." like, let's really show our personalities off. Anyway, so soliloquies, I feel, are there to be, you're talk to the audience. But then having done that so many times, last year Hamlet, I found it much, the idea, I suppose it's just much more in my bones to be able to really talk to the audience. And I find that, I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be able to really connect with a group of people, because it's so, it fills me up.
Yeah, and they're both about grief in a way.
They are.
Both about.
And Hamlet is.
And yeah, well, the same questions really, basically, Simon. Only a lot shorter.
But we've got many things in common. We've got a lot in common.
They do. But exactly the same way about Hamlet. I really do. People say Hamlet is a really, really, it's a tragedy. But my attitude towards Hamlet was there's so much comedy in that, and there's so much lightness. And if you play the lightness of that man, what was he like before his father was killed? What was the thing that makes us go, life is great, and then you go, oh, but now it isn't. That's what affects us, because if we're not enjoying life, then it's not particularly tragic that it's.
It was why it was such a great Hamlet, because it was because for me, everybody in that production, you especially, but everybody played it with such profound love.
Yeah, it's about love.
It was a play it became a play about love more than it became a self-conscious tragedy.
Yeah,
about mortality. I thought it was exquisite.
Thank you.
Sensational.
Anyway, moving on. Back to Simon, back to Stevens. Remember when old Shakespeare, he's on a good
Yeah. He's not bad, a bit long-winded. One more question and then open it to the audience. Simon, you mentioned, you both just said it's about love. I mean, Hamlet's about love, this is about... is this play, you write a lot, don't you, about love, about belonging.
Love and death and murdering kids, fundamentally. Just flogging the same horses again and again.
Do you think it does have parallels with other things? It's a lot about home.
No, I kind of say that as a joke. I think fundamentally that's what writers do. I think it's a myth that writers have to reinvent or rediscover a subject every time they sit and write. I think writers return to their mythologies with an obsession. The writers I adore, when I read Sarah Kane's plays, for example, who's a writer who's tremendously important to me, when I return to her plays, she's using the same stage images in every one of the plays. She uses the same lines of dialogue in Sarah Kane's plays. Robert Holman, who's another playwright who I completely revere, he returns again and again and again. We return to our themes in the way that we return to our nostalgias. Our creativity is born out of a need to complete things which were interrupted or repair things which are broken. And a proper writer, those breakages and those interruptions are profound. So of course you're going to return to them. Mm-hmm. And for me it is love and it is home. And the possibility of leaving home, or the impossibility of leaving home, the possibility of returning. It is my children, it is my family, it is my dead dad. It's all that shit. And then those interruptions are major. So I'm going to keep worrying away at them until I figure out what the hell happens with being alive.
And in a way, that's what Alex is doing, isn't it? He's doing that. He keeps telling the story because he has to try and understand it.
Yeah. 25 times he's told this story.
Still can't figure it out. It's still dead telling us. It's probably more than 25.
Should we open this up to the audience now? I'm sure loads of you have got questions. I think we've got some mics, haven't we? So, lady in the front with the mic.
This has possibly been touched on already, and I think I'm directing it to Andrew, but it could be also directed to you, Simon. But was it your choice to be on stage before the start of the monologue, and if so, why did you decide to do that?
I think it allows the audience, because there isn't a moment, I love that moment actually, there isn't a moment where the lights go down and goes, okay, fuck, I should better shut up now and stop talking about my conservatory and, go, there's a moment that if you just break that immediately, also in a way that the relationship of me looking at the audience and the audience looking at me is sort of over if you're there for 15 minutes, you've done that bit. You've seen me, I've seen you, so that's sort of already done. So you're not, because sometimes I think the most difficult part of a play is the first 5 minutes where you're like, oh, she's got weird hair, or you know, look at this weird. Oh, he's actually quite scrawny looking, whatever the fuck it is that the people think about the person that they're looking at, you know, like just that stuff. So that's sort of,
that's fucking Andrew's story.
So all that's over, and so I think that's what it does. When I went and did it in Ireland, I hadn't done a play in Ireland in 15 years, and that was so weird because it was like literally my geography teacher, like these people I went to school with, so you see them going in, because I can see, I try to see everybody coming in. So yeah, I think it's a part of the sort of, this isn't going to be like a normal, it's a little bit more like a stand-up gig, and that moment where you just stand at the front and you just wait for the audience to stop talking. I mean, there's never been a time where the audience don't stop talking. So there's a collective energy that makes the audience feel like we are here. We are not somewhere else. We are here and we're involved, and which I think, in a way, informs why people go, Scrubs, it's Scrubs, or something going on, if there's a siren or whatever. There used to be a tube going on, we did in the bush. It's actually, theatre doesn't have to be, you can still be transported, but still be in exactly the same place. And storytelling is about, it's not about having some pure, you know, it's dirty, it's a bit messy, and, you know, that's what Shakespeare does that do.
It's Shakespearean, it's just,
it's
just like playing the Globe, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
There it is.
Like,
Together,
you know, rather than this sort of terrible fear that, you know, it is awful when sometimes someone's mobile phone goes off. But if that happens, it happens. You don't get a trigger warning.
Yeah, exactly, it's really important.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think, like, why people come here is the sense of community that you get.
Yeah.
And I really find it so magical, just even today, because you were on stage already, and everyone just seemed to stop at the same time.
Yeah.
And just like, oh, and you just felt like,
Yeah. And then there's a really weird thing that happens sometimes, which is people stop before it started. It's just like, it's like a Mexican wave. And I'm looking at the audience going, I don't know why you stopped. It's so strange. Another 10 minutes, come on.
laugh when you laughed and everything.
In the back, can you wave your arms around or stand up or something?
I just wanted to talk about the fragmented nature of the writing. The way that you described it as dual tracks, the way that the story is being told almost simultaneously in 4 different ways. The story of the father, the story of the different conversations, the way the cut between them is incredible and allows to create such a three-dimensional view of all these different people. But I just wanted to ask, why did you choose to write it in that way? Why did you choose to keep this fragmented structure?
I don't know how conscious it was. I had a couple of things that were interesting at the same time. I think sometimes plays really spring when there's 2 or 3 ideas that somehow bounce off one another and make each other kind of bigger. And often, sometimes they can contradict or counterpoint each other, but in that counterpointing or that contradiction, they kind of amplify one another rather than reduce one another. I was really interested in my relationship with my father-in-law, who's a really complicated man who I really love. Really, you know, he died last year, and this is the first time I've seen the play since his death. But he was a really strange bugger, but I really loved him. I was really interested in my relationship, you know, with my wife and my kids, and France and the sea, but also of death, and also this kind of fixation that's creeping into the more recent plays as well. And I speak as a kind of secular atheist. The notion of God that secular atheists have is the most immature notion of everybody. And I was just kicking around the same ideas, and it happened to be that intellectually they just seem to inform one another, what love is, what death is, what God is. So it made sense to kind of keep them propelling alongside one another. You know, for me it's a play about When I make my plays, I ordinarily, the thing that I consider most is what does the character want? And for me in this play, the character wants to confess the thing that he said and can't confess it. And everything builds around that thing that he says. So all those three strands lead into that, I think. But it was, you know, it was a play that was written very quickly, so a lot of the decisions that I made were instinctive or intuitive decisions rather than conscious ones, I think.
Another question?
Just two short questions. The first of the script. You knew you wanted Andrew to do it.
Yeah.
How much did the script change from the moment you delivered it to him to the performance?
Very good.
At various times. And the second thing is quite different. If you called it something else, other than sea wall, such as rock pool or something like that, but it had made the slightest difference.
That's very good. I like that question a lot. How does the title inform an experience of the performance? I think it flagged. I mean, for me in here, I mean, I don't know how it feels for you, but of all the spaces you've played in, the actual sea wall has never felt more legible than here.
Right, okay, yeah.
And whenever you talk about the diving scene, I really feel the presence of the darkness. And for me, it's a really interesting thing because it's still in the kind of stand-up comedy bit.
Yeah.
And the wetsuit. We're not even reached the stand-up comedy pinnacle, which is the Daniel Craig. the Daniel Craig gag. But by just placing the sea wall as a thing of terror, even in what seems to be a consideration of love and fun, it just kind of introduces that counterpoint.
But it's such an interesting title in a sense because they're sort of gentle words, aren't they? Sea wall. They're nice words together, but they also don't. You wouldn't go, okay, that's going to be a play about, do you? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very good. No, you wouldn't.
It's pleasantly ambiguous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. It'd be good if people really thought they were going to come and see a play about, those sea walls that are on the kind of coastal edges of countries.
Yeah, well, I'd say people do.
Yeah. They're really disappointed. Yeah. I thought we were going to see a play about the civil engineering in fishing towns. That's drama. What I think is true, and you can correct me about if this is wrong, I think I fundamentally did 2 drafts of this. I think it's pretty much exactly as we did it, apart from there was one line change. And every time I've seen it, you deliver the line change to me, which I really love. I don't know if you're only doing that in my imagination.
No,
or if you're actually... Because there's the line about the bags of bread to feed the fish, and in the first draft I didn't include the phrase to feed the fish. So without it, it's just like, what the fuck has he got bread for? I remember being in Edinburgh, walking through Edinburgh with you.
Clearly.
I think we should add a line, Andrew, about to feed the fish, because otherwise the bags of bread make no sense. But I think fundamentally that's the only change.
Yeah.
I can't remember any other changes.
It was bespoke in a way, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah, so every time Simon is in, I say that to feed the fish. To feed the fish.
And I always blush. Like,
It's always like,
you're fucking
We all want to hear you. We want to see you play rock pool when it comes.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be really good.
Another question.
what about some people up there?
Yes, is anybody? Yeah. The lady in the middle there. Yes, it's.
And how do you mentally prepare for to perform it? Is it just one of those where you just let it come, or is it you have to really think about your life as Alex before?
No, I don't. I never really do that, if I'm honest. I feel like sometimes I think acting is a little bit too effortful. That the idea is if you're putting in an awful lot of effort the audience are going to get their money's worth. They can see all the work that you do, and you're going to stretch, and you're going to think about it, and you're going to, you know, and I actually think that's kind of strange in some way. I notice particularly when you're filming something on television and people are kind of doing this before a take. And then they go like, what? And then they go, action. And they're like, and then they're supposed to be natural. And you think, just say it, just say it. And that doesn't mean that there aren't techniques to go, I have to, you know, say the words properly, or, you know, I have to, you know, it's not, I don't want to undermine the job that most actors have to do, which is that you have to make it as engaging and as discernible for everybody in the audience as possible. But I do like to sort of jump off the cliff to sort of... There are so many jokes in my head that I'm not going to. No, I just like the idea of just going, of it being live, and it being, you know, it's Thursday, it's June 2018, and here we are, rather than, I don't know, sometimes I just think that there's too much, what I do in a way isn't really any of the audience's concern. It shouldn't be their concern, and homework is vastly overpraised. You know, it's the way awards campaigns are set up. You go, that person did all this work, so that is bound to be this extraordinary performance. And I think it's this sort of thing of, you know, DVD commentaries and behind the scenes that you go, oh God, we are told constantly how hard the actors work. It's like somebody telling you when you go to a party in their house how much time they spent cleaning it. We couldn't get that stain out earlier on. It's actually, you paid some money to go and see it. It's like it's not any of your, you know. So I like to be live, but that's just me, and that's not to say that there aren't millions of ways of going about it. But for me, I like to. What the worst thing about Seawall, frankly, is not having the other actors, because I love the other actors. So the audience become you guys become my colleagues in that sense, because you're the people that you're talking to and connect. And so if you're not connecting to anybody, usually it's the other actors on thing, but in this one it's this. So that's what I do.
Just a couple more, I think. There's somebody up there who's had their hand up very...
My question is to Andrew. Andrew, with Seawall, there is a beautiful musicality in your delivery. And my second part of the question is holding a pause, which you did very beautifully in Hamlet as well. So how do you sort of go about that? Because in classical sort of text, we find the musicality in the text. But with Seawall, the way you've sort of done it, there is a beautiful sort of musicality to it without sort of having it in the rhythm.
Yeah, I think, you know, Simon's writing, I've done a few of Simon's, two of Simon's plays, but read all Simon's plays and performed some of them. And there's a way of talking about Shakespeare, which is about the rhythm and the iambic pentameter and blah, 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 which is, of course is true to some extent. But Simon's writing has every bit as much a rhythm to it as Shakespeare does, but for some reason we don't burden Simon's writing in the same way. No, but I mean, it is a burden. If there were big tomes about how you should say his words, you just start getting a bit scared and intimidated, and you'd think, oh well, that's just there's some sort of thing that you have to possess in order to observe the work, and it becomes reverent in a way that I find really damaging to Shakespeare. Really fucking damaging. It makes me angry, actually, that it's been stolen by people who have been irresponsible with Shakespeare, to my mind. So the idea of the pause is totally based out on the music that, I suppose it's my interpretation of the music that he's written. And in the same way with Shakespeare, that there's rhythm to every single writer. My job is to try and almost, well, just to through some sort of weird osmosis, get into Simon's musicality. Dirty.
I'm really sorry, but we could be here all night. I think we honestly could be here all night. But who's really desperate? Who's really desperate? There's a lady at St Mary's, and secondly, you mentioned, Simon, how personal your plays come from, and having seen Fatherland on Saturday, I was wondering what's it like to see other actors perform some very intimate words that have come from very intimate plays. You have an actor in that. That's a play. This is the lyric Hamlet. There's an actor actually playing you in the. Yes, he's much better looking. That's really.
Who's playing you?
There's been two actors. Fernie Roberts played me last year.
Oh, I can see
and
that.
Nyasha, and I can't remember his family name, which is really embarrassing. Just played me. He's really, really beautiful. He's brilliant. He's fucking much more clever and. Handsome. Weirdly, I find watching Fatherland less personally complicated than watching something like Seawall. It's and I think it's because the metaphor is more exposing than the documentary. I think stories that are told metaphorically invite the audience in more than documentary drama does. Look, I mean, the thing is, right, a lot has been said about our, bromance. In Twitter in the last couple of weeks, a lot has been made of this. What is astonishing, it never feels exposing, I never feel embarrassed, I never feel humiliated, I never feel ashamed. Even when in Fatherland I come out as being somebody who was raised a Manchester City fan and changed teams halfway through my life. Even that doesn't embarrass me. Because what the joy about being a playwright is that your words are held in the hands and the body and the mouth and the brain of great artists. And to have actors like Ferdy or Nyasha or this fucker carry the stories that I've imagined, it only ever feels immensely moving. And it feels like a great privilege. And, kind of sitting here, like 200-year-old theatre, this is what has happened in this theatre for 200 years. Writers have suggested ideas, and the great actors of the last 2 centuries have communicated those ideas to their audience. You go backstage here and there's pictures of the great actors of the last 2 centuries, and I know absolutely with great certainty that this is part of that lineage, this man's part of that lineage. So to be a small part of that is just profoundly moving.
Thank you.
I'd love to say... we've been, as I said, we've been doing it for 10 years. And I don't know if we will do it again. But it is, I just think it feels very important to say to you, Simon, to say thank you, because it has been the most extraordinary journey that I've ever, bless you, journey that I've ever been on, and obviously I think about you every time we do it, and it's brought an unbelievable amount of joy into my life, and I sometimes think, God, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have this incredible, unbelievably precious thing in my life, and it's meant more to me than any job I've ever done, and I just want to say thank you, and I love you.
It's all right, man.
Now.
Well, you've got a few texts. Plenty of people interested in you.
Not my phone, sadly. I'm really sorry, but I think we do need to end it there, though. We could go on. I think we could still be here in a week's time talking about this wonderful play. just a note to say, it does continue till Saturday, and last time I looked, there were still a few tickets available.
Shocking.
I know. And you will do it again. You have to do it again. Come on, you can't do it again.
I'll be until it gets a bit weird, then you've got a
You're
daughter.
120. There's also a film. I'll plug your DVD. There's a film of it, and actually I've seen the film, and it's interesting because it's still an absolutely wonderful thing, but it's slightly different.
Yes,
if you Google
Seymourfilm.com.
you can acquire it for a modest price, and also anyone who hasn't been able to get in to see this yet.
So you could watch it.
The next show here is called A Monster Calls, and it's based on the book by Patrick Ness, and it's adapted by the fabulous Sally Cookson, who did Jane Eyre at the National Theatre last year. And it's just finished a run, I think, at another Old Vic, the Bristol Old Vic. So it's obviously doing a tour of Old Vics, but it was very well received there, hugely acclaimed. And it runs here for just 6 weeks from the 7th of July. And it's also, interestingly, about grief and loss and children. And mums, there you go. Somebody's stealing your ideas, So that's not to be missed. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much to these wonderful artists, to Simon and Andrew for being so incredibly generous with their time and for the wonderful baby you've created together.